Welcome to another episode of Metal Mastermind. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what you need to prepare for your live show. Now, it's no secret that we are amongst a pandemic this year, but it doesn't excuse why we shouldn't prepare for live shows. Because guess what? People love music. People are going to go to a live show, even if it's not today or even this year. Live shows will come back. And now is the perfect opportunity for you to build your arsenal. So let's get into it. What do you need? One of the things that's really important about a live show is the artist's ability to hear themselves. Now, the bigger the stage, the further away your bandmates are going to be. So having communication between your bandmates is really important, especially if they're further away. Nobody's just going to be like, "Hey! Hey! Hey!" Yeah. That's just going to blow out your vocal cords. So let's not do that. In other words, we're going to look at how we can listen to our music in an efficient and cost-effective manner. The wonderful thing is that we have this thing called monitor mixes. Now, these monitor mixes are basically a musician's way of hearing themselves and hearing the music around them. It's important to have this done right so that when you're on stage, you're feeling comfortable, so that you can perform at your best. Monitor mixing is an art in of itself, but there are ways to streamline this even further. And here's the thing. When you get an application on an iPad, such as the Behringer X32 application, you'll find that it is easy to control. The only thing that you need to add to that is an actual unit to connect to. In this case, companies like Behringer or Midas, they create many different sorts of units. And in this case, this can be mounted in your rack of gear. So you could have your Axe-Fx or Helix from, Line 6 or Fractal or Kempers, these guitar amplification models. But you can also have in that same rack unit an entire mixing console that's controlled by your iPad. How cool is that? So, using this kind of technology, you can actually mix yourself. You may not have to hire a monitor engineer. In the case of, if you don't know necessarily much about engineering, hire a buddy just for the first maybe few shows just to get your levels right, or play around with it at home and try to figure it out yourself. It's actually a lot of fun. It's not so different than using something like Logic or Pro Tools. The benefit of this is that you can save your settings, and then this could be a repeatable thing from show to show. If you're using something like in-ear monitors, you can listen to the same mix every night. It only gets tricky when you have something like speaker wedges on the floor blasting sound at you. This sort of monitoring is dependent on its environment. So you're going to have to tweak the sound from show to show. If you're not into doing all of that, in-ear monitors is the way to go, where you could listen to the same exact mix every night.
Now, the next thing we need to talk about when you're preparing for a live performance is the signal that you're using, okay? And this is going to be easy for some of the band members and maybe not so easy for others, and we'll get to that. So we want to talk about direct versus mic'd. Okay, so what you're using, that's going to impact what Ken just talked about, the monitoring, and it's also going to have a great impact on the mixing that the sound person is responsible for. So let's talk about direct signal first. This is clearly the easiest path to take. And the vocalist pretty much doesn't have much to worry about in this case because they're singing into a mic and that mic is going directly to the mixing board. Now it might be running to some effects or something like that before it gets there, but ultimately the sound person is going to be able to easily adjust that signal. because it's direct. Now with drums, of course, at mid-sized to larger venues, you're going to be miking the drums, and those mics are going to provide a direct signal as well. Of course, there's going to be some extra noise on stage from the drummer, but for the most part, and especially again at mid-sized to larger venues, the drummer is going to be placed in a strategic position so that the drums on stage are not overpowering the mixes coming out of everyone else's monitors. So yeah, they'll hear the drums, but they'll still be able to hear their monitor mix as well. Now, if you're not miking the drums, this can present a problem with the person running sound sometimes because they have no control over the volume of the drums, obviously. Now, that would probably be for really tiny venues. So the sound person in that case will have to really carefully mix everything else so that it matches the volume of the drums, so that way you've got an even mix. Now, the real problem, children, when it comes to direct versus using a mic for your signal, usually it's the guitar player, and sometimes, hey, it's the bass player as well. But I'm gonna pick on the guitar players. Hey, I'm a guitar player. Let's go the easy route and talk about the direct signal. So if you're a guitar player and you're playing through something like an amp modeler, such as the Axe FX or the Line 6 Helix or the Kemper or something like that, then hey, no issue. You're providing a direct signal to the sound man. You're plugging that unit oftentimes directly into the board, and the sound man has much more control over the overall mix when you're doing it that way. However, us metal guitarists, we like the sound and feel of our tube amps, and this can sometimes create a little challenge for the sound person and of course everyone else on stage, because you have to crank that tube amp normally to a certain level to get that saturation and get those tubes warmed up and to get the sound that you desire. But what you don't want is your amp on stage to drown out everyone else, and you don't want that to impact their monitor mix either. So you really have to prepare ahead of time and strategically place your amp in a position and mess around with the volume and the gain and all that good stuff so that you still get a good sound, but you're not drowning everyone else out on stage to the point where they can't hear themselves or their monitor mix. And to create another level of complexity for the sound person, oftentimes that guitar amp is also mic'd, because if you just have a guitar amp on stage, you may not be able to hear that well outside in the audience in certain spots throughout the floor. So you're going to want to mic that amp as well. Now this means the sound person has a dual job here just for the guitar player. They have to work with you to control your amp volume on stage so it's not drowning everyone else out, and they've also got to work with your mic'd volume so that the mix sounds great to the audience. So those are just some things to think about on stage, because remember, the audience didn't come just to hear your guitar, they came to hear the band. So you want to make sure that you're not overpowering everyone else on stage. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's kind of a no-brainer, but always have a backup. Now, that backup may be guitar strings or maybe even a second backup guitar. It could be a backup mic for your lead singer or for the drums or for one of the amps or so forth. And definitely bring backup cables, at least 1/4 inch and then 1 XLR, because those tend to go bad sometimes. So always bring a backup. Be prepared to have that in case something during the performance just stops working. Maybe even a backup guitar player.
Now, preparing for a live show can get tricky. And this is a very subjective thing, of course, as well. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is our clarity of mind. Here's the thing, right? If you get too wasted before a show, well, you start to take a hit on your performance. And that's not good, because your fans came to see you. And if you're opening up to a bigger band and people haven't heard you at all, now you've just botched your first impression. And what do people remember? It's the first impression, and they judge a book by its cover, even if they don't want to. It's what lasts. It's the imprinting process. So, how do you go about preparing for the live show? Well, it's good to do your warm-ups and all that good stuff, but you don't want to overextend into abusing substances. You want to make sure that, yeah, that's fine to have like a beer or two just to kind of keep the edge off a little bit, but you don't want to go overboard to the point where your body is starting to feel physical repercussions from that intoxication. You know, I myself have been around people who have abused substances, of course, like many metal bands do. But in that case, I really found it to be counterproductive because it was only getting in the way of what needed to be done. And quite frankly, things like rehearsals took a nosedive in terms of productivity. And that's not what rehearsal is supposed to be. Rehearsal is supposed to be getting yourself ready for a show, or for the studio for that matter.
So you've got some great tips to prepare for your live performance, but what about virtual live performances? And at the time of filming this video, virtual live performances are a pretty hot thing. A lot of bands and solo artists even are doing virtual lives. The same principles that we went over apply to virtual live performances as well. The greatest difference is you want to do a thorough sound check to see how that's gonna sound on the camera before you go live. Because once you start, you're probably not gonna know if your levels are peaking or if you're too soft or if the mix is just crappy or if the mic that you're filming with is just bad. You're not gonna know that until you're live if you don't check it beforehand. And once you start a live show and you have to stop in the middle of it, you kind of kill the vibe. Your audience, because they're online, they're gonna be on to something else, watching somebody else's video. So it's crucial that you prepare and do a proper sound check in advance. Now, I wanna give you one additional tip here because a lot of you are not gonna be performing with the entire band. Instead, you're gonna be doing some solo stuff on camera because that's just a little bit easier to do, especially if you're doing the social distance thing or if it's just not feasible for whatever reason that your band get together for this. So let's say you're doing the virtual live performance on your own, and let's just say you want to play or sing to a backing track. I want to give you a really quick and easy way to do this. And actually, this is something I personally do for my live performances. So you've got your backing track of one of your songs. Now in that backing track, I'm going to assume you either took out the vocals and just dump down the music if you're going to be singing live to it, or maybe you're a solo guitarist, so you'd want to strip out the lead guitar tracks in your studio and just dump down the version without those, so that way when you play it live along with the backing track, it's authentic and it's genuine. So you've got one track in your studio for that, then you set up another track for your live guitar and or your live vocals. Sometimes I'll do both. I'll sing and play guitar along with the backing track, which means I'll strip the vocals and the lead guitar tracks out of that song so that I can organically sing and play along with it. Next, you grab your camera and your mic and try to strategically place your mic sort of in between both studio monitors if you're in a setting like I am in your home studio. Then just do a simple sound check on your camera. Press play in your studio and start playing or singing, or both if that's what you're doing, along with your backing track. Then go back and listen to it and see how that sounds. Mess around with that until you get the levels right and it sounds great. Then you're ready to go live. So that's just a really simple method that you can use with minimal equipment.
I hope that this was a big help for you, and if it was, please give us a like, a thumbs up, and we want to help support as many of you as possible. This is a channel dedicated for personal growth as well as technical knowledge. We want to give you the tools for you to succeed in your own life as a metal musician. So if you're into that, please give us a like and subscribe. We give content to you guys every week, and we have live shows every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. And if you subscribe to our email list at metalmastermind.com/join, you will be able to download our free quick guide to the ultimate home studio. It's an easy read, giving you all the necessary things to get your studio up and running or upgrade what you already have. That's it for now. Until next time, horns up.